are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Specifying Practice Group webinar. Our topic for today is the many options for LEED specs. Our thought leaders are Dave Stutzman and Louis Metcalf. Dave is a registered architect, certified construction specifier, and founding principal of Conspectus, a specifications and quality assurance consulting firm. Dave will be a speaker at the Construction Specifier Academy, February 24th to the 26th in Dallas, Texas. Louis is an architect, certified construction specifier, and manages the specifications and quality assurance programs for Gresham, Smith & Partners, a national architectural engineering, interiors, and planning firm. Louis is scheduled to present So You Want to Write a PPD webinar on November 17th. For more information on the CSI Academies and webinars, please visit csinet.org. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. Your participation during today's webinar is encouraged, and we have allowed time to take questions throughout the presentation. Although attendee audio lines are muted, you may click the raise hand button to indicate that you have a question or comment. We will identify you by name and unmute your line, at which point you may begin. If you are participating via streaming audio and do not have a computer microphone, you may also type your question into the chat box.
At CSI.
Dave and Louis, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Welcome to this month's presentation on the many options for the LEED specs. And as you can see here, I've got a little bit of a graphic going on here just to sort of explain that it's not quite as simple as it may seem. There are a lot of twists and turns and some intersections. What I wanted to do is go over the concept that we have diametrically opposed things going on with LEED. One is goals and requirements, and the other is the idea of how we end up specifying LEED, whether we try to put it all in one place, in a centralized place, or whether we disperse it among a whole bunch of different places. So, Erica, we're going to start, we have a couple of polls set up to go throughout the presentation, and we're going to try to judge where everybody is in
for those of
process.
For those of you who haven't attended one of our sessions before, we do really try to create some opportunities for some interaction, because Dave and I want to learn from this experience as well as sharing some ideas and experience that we have. And one of the ways that we do that is that we ask questions from time to time, and then you participate, and then we can share the results of those very quickly. So let us know how common are LEED requirements on your projects.
Great. So the poll has been launched. And Dave, your voice is going in and out, so if you could keep the phone close to you so there's no fading.
I will try to do that. Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you. Sure. We'll just give everyone a couple more seconds. Okay, it looks like 55% on how common are LEED requirements on your projects. 55% put some projects, 26% few projects, 19% most projects.
Okay, so we have a good majority at least are dealing with LEED on a pretty regular basis. So that's pretty encouraging, because I'm hoping that we get some good feedback from those of you that are producing LEED specifications as to what your opinions are on how to approach LEED specifications. So let's go right to the second question, Erica, if you could. And what we're trying to find out is just how you're designing your projects too, if you're actually trying to use LEED when you're not actually going for certification under the USGBC program, but still relying on the concepts for LEED.
And the poll has been launched.
And just as a bit of a background, I'll tell you that from my perspective and writing project specifications, that we're writing quite a few projects each year. So far, we've completed about 150 LEED projects. Not all of them have actually gone for certification, and we only have one that actually reached platinum level, and it's one of 2 in the world for a luxury resort. But it's been pretty much everything in between. Louis, how about you?
We've done a fair number. Interestingly enough, one of our biggest projects was the North American headquarters for Nissan automobiles here in the Nashville area. And when they got down to the end, it qualified for certification, but Nissan decided that instead of paying for a plaque on the wall, that they would take that same amount of money and install a green roof on a portion of the building.
Well, that's an interesting response.
Yeah, but our firm has decided that we are going to basically use the LEED checklist as a sort of a design guideline, even on the projects that aren't being going for specific certification. Try to bring our practice to a higher level with respect to sustainability issues.
Okay, let me share the poll results with you. Does your firm use LEED for designing and specifying projects where the owner is not trying for LEED certification? 60% is yes, 40% is no. Alan would like to say that he answered no to question 2. However, they take sustainability into consideration on all projects.
Very good.
Yeah, so 60% of you are still using LEED regardless whether it may be a requirement for the project. That's also pretty impressive. So heading on, what we want to do is I would like to talk about LEED, because LEED approaches some of the items in the checklist as goals, as overall project goals. And one of the concerns I have about putting goals, especially into the specifications, is whether or not you can actually specify goals and who actually controls those specifications, or who controls the outcome when you actually are specifying goals. So Erica, we're going to load you up here at the beginning, and we're going to ask you to do one more poll, and then we'll start through the presentation just a little bit more quickly without so many questions, leading questions.
Okay, poll is launched. Who controls LEED goal compliance?
And I know that I don't have all of the players listed, but I think we have the principal players listed for each contract. And if anybody would like to offer an opinion that it's someone other than the ones that we have, that's fine. Type your question into Erica, raise your hand, and let us know that you have another opinion.
Yes, and I'd like to remind everyone of the raise your hand button under your attendee list here. If you raise your hand, that way you can speak to someone if you have those capabilities. Sometimes it's nicer than having me read the questions aloud.
Oh, now, Erica, we all really enjoy your dulcet and mellifluous tones.
Thank you, sir.
And
Everyone,
Erica,
a couple more minutes.
as we were getting started, too, I had someone that had phoned in here looking for the actual dial-in phone number. Is that something that you have available that we could broadcast while we're waiting?
I think it's in audio mode if you click Use Telephone, and there apparently is an issue with the question. It says choose all that applies, but you can only choose one, and that's a mistake that was made when the poll was set up. So we apologize for the inconvenience.
Well, then we'll just say who is the primary
There you go.
responsible person, entity, I should say.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close the poll. We'll assume the primary is the designer specifier at 44%. The owner is up close at 42%. Contractor 13%.
Okay, so it's definitely not the contractor, at least according to our group. The owner setting goals, I suppose, really it is ultimately the owner's prerogative, but I think that between the owner and the designer specifier, those are the folks that are really controlling the process and identifying what is going to be included in the project specifications, and then it's going to be up to them to try to document how we're going to actually set up the contractor compliance. Now,
Dave,
yes?
we have a couple of hands raised. Would you like to take some questions?
Absolutely.
Steve Kendrick? Go ahead, Steve. Okay. Steve Lowry, do you have a question? Okay. I believe those are all mistaken clicks. Go right ahead.
Well, okay. If you do have questions, please do, or questions or even comments. We want to hear your opinion. This is meant to share opinions, these presentations, not meant to be a monologue. So can goals actually be specified? And my biggest concern with this is that if it's a goal and you put it into the project specifications, once it's in the spec, it does become, to me, a contract requirement. And if it's specified as a goal and the contractor does not meet it, is that something that is actually a contractor default for the project contract? And that, to me, is, I have not seen any articles or legal interpretations of it, and it's probably just perhaps an over concern on my part. But I think it's something that we at least ought to be aware of as we're specifying the LEED compliance and trying to identify these as goals.
I don't think so, David. I think that this is a kind of a critical legal point, actually, is that we need to tell the contractor what it is that the owner wants the contractor to do, what work is to be done. You know, traditionally, the Spearin doctrine, the legal rule, has been that if the contractor fulfills to the letter the drawings and specifications, the owner doesn't have any comeback on it. In other words, if the contractor builds it the way it's drawn and specified and it leaks or it doesn't work or whatever, that's the owner's issue, maybe with his designer, but the contractor has fulfilled its contract and can't be held responsible. But if we get into things where we are providing more in the way of goals rather than specific contract requirements, and we give the contractor the leeway to come up with alternative means of hitting those goals, then the contractor is going to become legally responsible for the outcome. And they may not be real crazy about signing that kind of contract.
They may not.
A comment from Andrea Cooper. I'm sorry, that we're getting a couple of comments coming in.
Okay, go ahead.
Address that as well. Okay. Andrea Cooper, if a goal is a project requirement, why would it be specified as a goal as opposed to being specified as a requirement?
Ah, okay. And herein lies some of the confusion, because the way that LEED is trying to identify some of these credits, they're actually identifying them as project goals and not as necessarily project requirements. And if we're following the letter of the reference guides from LEED, we're actually seeing LEED consultants coming in and setting up the language in the specifications as project goals. And here's my concern about specifying something as a goal. How do you enforce it? If it's simply a goal and not a requirement, if it's missed, is that a failure on the contract's part? Because goals really are aspirations. It's not necessarily something that is hard set. And here's and a little bit of an anecdote. Here it is. The designer. I specified what I thought possible. If he thinks that we can meet the 10% regional materials and specify that that's indeed what the project goal is, but doesn't give the contractor any idea as to how to accomplish that goal, the next logical step might be from the contractor, I tried my best, but, and he's failed to meet the minimum requirements for a LEED credit, and at that point, does he jeopardize the building certification? And this all because something may have been specified as a goal instead of a specific requirement for the contractor to meet. Louis, thoughts on that?
Comments.
Well, there is a growing body of litigation. It's still very early days on that, but of owners and who are dissatisfied that their building does not meet certain energy criteria, or I'm not sure if there have been any lawsuits specifically about whether or not a building failed to meet the certification for LEED.
Not that I know of, not yet. Erica, you said you had a couple of comments?
I do. Joe Antrella, the owner goals become requirements through the contract documents. And Alan Itzkowitz, goals and requirements are distinctly different. I include the requirements and specifications so that we can meet the owner's goals of LEED certification.
Yes, and that's the point I was trying to make earlier, is that, and David was too, is that we need to take LEED goals, but we have to make them into specific contract requirements that can be legally enforced and are very clear for everybody to know exactly what the responsibility of the contractor is to do. What work are we asking him to or her to do?
I have lots and lots of comments.
Go right ahead, Erica, because if we don't make it through the presentation, that's fine with me. I mean,
we'll finish it next month.
Yeah, we can continue it later.
Okay. Susan Foster, a goal should be backed up by the requirement, shouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Should I read it again? Okay, wonderful. Bob Masalat, can goals be specified? Yes, if it's done as a performance spec. No, if it's written as a proprietary or descriptive. Caution, mixing spec methods is a recipe for disaster. Example, performance goal, 45 miles per hour, or megagrams, I'm sorry, proprietary spec, GM Hummer, descriptive spec, 2-ton load capacity. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think he has a good point that mixing and matching can lead to disaster. You need to know what it is that you've included in the specification and how eventually you're going to have to enforce it.
But from the examples that Bob gave, I just wonder, is he on the right station, or did he really intend to dial into car talk?
And that would be miles per gallon, not miles per hour.
Ah,
I apologize.
okay.
We have another comment from Alan.
They were good. Those are good, very clear examples, and that was very well thought out.
Okay. Another from Alan, including the specification that the contractor is to provide X amount of recycled contact, it becomes a contract requirement, not a goal.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else, Erica?
Oh, I've got tons.
Tons.
And again, this would be tons, and a wonderful opportunity for someone to raise their hand, as opposed to me just kind of reading all of these. We've got one
That would-
from, we'll do two more.
Okay, that would be
How's that?
great. If you wanted to, I don't know if it's possible for you to do this, but if we're going to talk about requirements, if you want to, somewhere in between here, launch the next poll while we try to deal with some of these questions too.
Great. Let's see, launching the poll now. Again, this is choose all that apply, and I'm pretty sure you may only select one. So let's choose the primary.
Right.
Thank you. From Sandy McClellan, aren't we under an obligation to state exactly how compliance with the requirement will be determined? This really isn't just a super performance spec. How well do you think we would fare if we specified a roof simply as not to leak?
Well, you've hit on some of the topics that I try to preach to some of our architects that we deal with. And I haven't been terribly successful with the approach yet, Sandy. And it's one of those things where I'll pick on recycled content or regional materials. I think are sort of classic examples. When I have the architects asking us to specify those two credits, one of my first questions back to them is, what research have you done to ensure that you can actually hit those credits? You know, what kinds of materials are you using? And do we have enough in the cost item, because they're measured by cost, to know that we can actually accomplish them? Just putting it in the spec doesn't necessarily make it so.
Okay.
I wonder also,
Another?
David, if that is related to the kind of the common idea that misconception that to meet LEED requirements or certification, the primary thing is you just have to change your specs rather than changing the way we design buildings in the first place.
It could very well be, because it's some of the comments, at least when LEED was new, seemed to be that it was just a matter of adding information into the spec to be able to ensure compliance. And I don't believe that that's true. I believe that you still have an obligation to do enough research to know that the end result is possible.
And of course, we all know the danger of specifying something that's impossible, that doesn't exist. That's a
Right.
surefire way to get lots of RFIs.
Right. And I do know, looking at our attendee list, and I did this ahead of time actually, but Sarah Sweeney has joined us today. And Sarah, I know, is operating as a LEED consultant. And it would be really interesting to hear her opinion, because I think some of these things, we hear the specifier architect approach, but we have a multitude of LEED consultants out there. And actually, I've seen so many different approaches coming from LEED consultants. I hope Sarah's on the phone and can chime in here at some point.
Sarah is in the meeting, but she's unable to speak on the phone, so any comment she has will be communicated through the questions box.
Okay, good. Well, that'll work too. Thank you.
And looking at the response to the poll, we see, of course, the overwhelming majority is that we think that the designer or specifier is the one who is primarily responsible for LEED compliance. And one of the questions that I think I would ask then of our audience is, are we getting additional fee to do this additional surface? This is not something that is part of the traditional practice of architecture, but now we have a whole extra set of, because this is not just simply processing typical submittals. This is an additional level of keeping track of information, and are we getting compensated for that? We don't have a poll for that, but if anybody wants to throw in 2 cents, we'd be happy to hear.
Okay, and of course we have 2 cents coming through in the questions box. And let me just say, if we don't answer your questions on the particular box, I can circulate the questions to Dave and to Lewis afterwards, and perhaps you can take a look and answer them at that time.
Right, and we will try to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Joe Antrella says, of course not. And Alan says, yes, additional fee is negotiated for us to do the work or hire a lead consultant. Let me just say that the poll has been closed. May I read you the results?
Sure.
Who controls lead requirement compliance? 69% designer specifier, 24% contractor, 7% owner.
Okay. And if we make it through the presentation far enough, I think we'll probably try to question that response a bit. I would say that the perception that we see from the answers to the poll is probably what everyone does think, but I have maybe a little bit of a twist on this. And Lewis, you mentioned
Yes.
that you should be getting some sort of an extra fee on this as the designer or architect entity in the project. And I will tell you that from our standpoint as a specifier, LEED to us is almost so commonplace anymore that it doesn't affect our fee.
Okay, fair enough. So now you get all you folks out there know where to go for specifications consulting on your LEED projects.
So I don't even bother to really separate it anymore. I've had people ask us for a separate fee on it, and I say, yeah, it's not worth it.
True, but where the expense comes in is in the contract administration and design up front, not necessarily just the writing of specs.
Okay, so here...
I have a comment.
Yes.
This is from David Quaid. How can the designer specifier be the one who controls compliance when the contractor is the one who is actually doing the work?
Okay, and I would probably give you a sneak preview of something later in the presentation, but if you look at the LEED credit requirements and you look to see that through LEED Online now they have set up a 2-tier review process, and they've already recognized that some credits are controlled entirely during the design process, and some are reliant almost entirely on the construction phase of the project. So there are credits certainly that will be controlled entirely by the design team, and there are still credits that are heavily reliant on the contractor's performance.
I think part of the also is the issue is who's responsible for verifying or enforcing that compliance. And like I say, there are design issues that the contractor has no control over, and the contractor does things that the owner expects us to assist the owner, in enforcing on the contractor. So it's a balance.
Right. And that sort of goes to the question that I have on the screen at the moment too, is that if it is a requirement that the contractor has no control over, for instance, designing the energy system to meet LEED credits under energy and atmosphere, those are almost entirely design-based. So can you require the contractor to do anything to actually control compliance with those credits? And I think the answer there is probably not. Can you try to pass some of that design over to the contractor? Yes, you probably can, but then it becomes more performance spec, and you have to carefully craft those requirements to make sure you are compliant.
So what does the fine print say, David?
So there you have it. If you're going to make the contractor responsible, what sort of leeway are you going to give him? Can he change products? Can he change quantities? Can he do something entirely different?
I think this gets back to, I think it was Bob's observation earlier about mixing methods of specifying in terms of not giving the contractor the opportunity to really comply. You know, we can write things that are impossible to comply with, and we have to give them some leeway as to if we're going to require some sort of outcome. They have to be able to control how they're going to do that.
And
So,
this sort of reminds me of a story from one of our early LEED projects. The project happened to be in Rhode Island for one of the universities, and the requirement for the project was to use gypsum board that had both high recycled content and was manufactured regionally. Well, anybody that would know geography is you stick a project in Rhode Island and 2/3 of your 500-mile circle is gone because it's in the middle of the ocean. So you have very little to draw from for material suppliers. When we actually conducted the research for this particular product on this project and found that, yes, we could get high recycled content gypsum, we could get regional gypsum, we could not get both. Because the recycled content gypsum was manufactured outside of the 500-mile radius, and if we wanted both, we couldn't get both. We had to make a choice. When I presented the results of the research to the architect, the response was, "I don't care, specify both." And at that point, we set the contractor up for immediate failure. He couldn't possibly do both, and we knew it.
and
The architect wasn't willing to accept that as a response.
set yourself up for a very expensive time period in contract administration trying to solve those problems then.
Oh, sure, because now it's an immediate RFI and a potential change order, and the architect knew up front that there was no way that it could be done. So
Is there an
go ahead, Louis. Sorry.
I'm not familiar enough with the LEED system. Would there be advantage and points one way or the other? How would you make that kind of decision as to whether it's regional or recycled content if you have to choose between the two?
It's it's a balancing game. If you are trying to meet the LEED requirements and you need credits in both regional and recycle, again, you may not be able to get both for every project. So you would want to try to balance the cost items, the major cost items. That's where you need to look to make sure that you're going to get enough regional and enough recycle content, and pick and choose and set up the spreadsheet and try it and do the what ifs and maneuver things around and see what's going to work to get the best benefit.
I have a couple of comments.
Go ahead.
From Carrie, we have set up a method to have contractors complete an action plan as costs for MR 4 and 5 cannot be known when writing the specifications. Thus, the design team has to write the specifications with the spec writer to make as many products as available for MR 4 and 5. But the contractor has to follow through and show the team. I'm sorry, this is quite long. One moment.
Sure.
Thus, the design team has to write the specification with the spec writer to make as many products as available for MR 4 and 5. But the contractor has to follow through and show the team that they will. Same with MR 7.
Okay,
Does that make
and
sense?
it does, and I'm going to take a wild stab because I don't always remember, but MR 4 and 5, I believe, are the regional and the recycled content. And MR 7 is, I want to say, certified wood or rapidly renewable, and I'm probably got those two backwards. So I would agree that what I would love to see the actual design team do is, if they're specifying those credits, to do a little bit of research on their own. I think it's important to know that the credit is reasonably able to be had for the project. And you get into conditions like Rhode Island or Maine, even worse, that you've eliminated such a large area for regional materials that it's really difficult to get that credit.
We've got more comments, one from Steve Kendrick. Regional or recycled, all part of strategizing which credit the project is most likely to achieve.
Yes, it is, and I agree totally.
And a question from Justin Kerfoot. What about the changes in the industry that might occur between when the spec is written and when the project is built? If you immediately eliminate it, then you eliminate it from future ability if it is available.
Well, that's kind of the problem that we always have. I mean, you can specify a product, and then between now and when the contractor actually starts to buy it, it's gone out of production. And, you know, that's a risk that we have to always have to face, and that's one of the things that we need to consider when we are looking at products, is how likely is this to be in production for a while, because it's not, I think, as much of a problem today when we're doing so many projects in a fast-track situation as it was some years ago, when you'd write a spec and it might be 6 months, it might be a year before the project was actually fully bid out.
And
why don't we go on to the next slide there?
Yeah. Do you think that in some cases, Louis, in here, the designer, if we specify 10% recycle and thought it was going to be easy, I would say that the only way that we really can try to help the contractor achieve this is actually to do the homework ahead of time, to know that the actual products we're specifying can meet the recycle content, or to write an open specification to allow the contractor to shop that particular product to be able to make sure that he can meet the overall project recycle content.
Yes, and I think, David, that the whole LEED sustainability movement is one of the various pressures in our industry that is causing us to have to think a lot more and a lot harder and do more work earlier in the design process than we've ever had to do before. You know, there was a time when I could remember as a cub draftsman that the specifications were written like the last 2 weeks of the project. We can't do that anymore. We have to, many times we have to know a lot of the specific products even as early as schematic design, and certainly in design development.
Right, and so here, you know, once we specify the recycle content and the contractor comes back and says, what are they thinking? And I had that happen on one of our projects where we were doing a low-rise housing project. It was 4 stories. It was all wood frame. And,
yes.
You know, typically when you're looking at recycled content, you're looking at steel because it's such a huge ticket item and it's got a high recycled content. You take that away and now replace it with wood framing. How are you going to get that? It becomes very difficult. So if we don't,
we have someone. Sorry.
If we don't consider it, we may be back to the owner asking, wait a minute, what about my certification?
Especially if there's a perception on their end that they are paying a little bit more for the building to try to get LEED certification.
Right. Go ahead, Erica.
We have someone with a question. Kim Tuyet,
Yes.
Are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Go right ahead with your question.
Yeah, I got a question. I have a project here. The engineer and the owner go after EA Credit 3.1, test is the indoor air quality. The contractor select the building flush out. My question is, in the project, have the lead consultant and the commissioning authority, who will be the control, the lead to oversee the building flush out activity?
Who oversees it? If you have a commissioning agent, I would believe that they would be involved in that because that would be part of the final commissioning report. If there's no enhanced commissioning, then it would probably fall to the contractor. And that could.
In this case, the commissioning only have the fundamental coming after the design already.
Okay. And with fundamental commissioning, that can be done by the design team or by the contractor, not necessarily an independent agent.
Okay. Because there's a controversy right here where we are. We have the LEED AP, but the LEED AP didn't do anything. So everything is falling onto the shoulder of the commissioning agent. But the commissioning agent is the state. He will lead the commissioning activity, meaning he will monitor the humidity and the temperature.
Right.
But how to scheduling, he said it's not on him.
Right, because the commissioning agent is not performing the testing. He is only observing and monitoring the results.
Correct. But who will lead that activity? The contractor said no, he's not going to do it because he.
Because it wasn't in his scope.
On his spec.
Right. So if you don't have that specified as part of the project, then it does become a difficult enforcement, and probably is going to lead to a change order to be able to get it done.
Yeah, that's what we learn it now. For right now, we just ask the commissioning authority, please do.
Right. Someone will end up having to pay for it eventually.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Carrie. Go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, I was just trying to ask about the MR credit for, again, on cost information. If there's no cost information until a hard bid, basically, from a contractor, how are we supposed to write specs or get product information and to write the specs for, for that situation, to get 10% or 20% for recycled content or regional materials? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Louis, you're the expert on contracts, aren't you? And if you're operating under AIA contracts, I believe the architect's responsible to provide a probable cost statement early on in the project, and I would think at least you could use that as a basis for checking for both regional and recycled content materials.
It certainly needs to be thought of earlier. Of course, I don't know about other folks, but in our practice, we're finding more and more, most of our projects, the contractor is on board early enough that they do the cost estimating during the design process. But yes, that needs to be thought about early during the process, and it's just what I mentioned earlier, that we have to do a lot more thinking and a lot harder thinking much earlier in design.
Right. You don't necessarily need to have the hard bid pricing information to be able to make some of these decisions. Having budget information is probably going to be sufficient in many cases, at least to know that you're within a reasonable shot of getting these credits. One of the things I wanted to pressing on here in the presentation, we have the LEED reference guide actually shows us or explains two different ways of specifying LEED requirements. And the two specific examples they use, low-emitting materials is one, where they actually lay out these 4 items as to what should be included in the specification. And if you notice, this is text taken straight out of the reference guide, that it says include requirements within the spec section applicable to a particular trade or product. So what they're saying is divisions 2 through, in our case, 10, which is actually where the limit is that we should be specifying all of the low-emitting material requirements in each individual section. And if we have Division 1 section dealing with LEED overall, that we should be referring back to that section for the LEED credit requirements. So what I did is I collected a couple of examples that show this, and this first text is actually from spec text. The disclaimer is, of course, that our firm is responsible for spec text, so that's I'm most familiar with that. But here's the example from Division 1, where it's an overall requirement to say, okay, adhesives and sealants, for instance, have to meet either the South Coast Rule 1168 or they have to meet the California requirements for schools. Now, this would appear in Division 1. Oh, let me get back. Oh, I lost that one, didn't I? We'll get back there. Hang in there. Okay, back to there. All right, that would translate into Division 9 requirement also, where we're getting into a specific material. Now this coming out of Division 9, I think this was a gypsum board section where we were talking about adhesives where you would say laminate multiple gypsum boards to get multiple layers. So we have the same kinds of information repeated in Division 9. The spec text approach is you can use Division 1 entirely. You can use Division 1 with the information in Division 9 in this example, or you can rely on Division 9. It really sets it up as a specifier choice. The other specification system, Master Spec, does a similar kind of an arrangement. Here it is from Division 1, where they're listing all of the different kinds of adhesives and the maximum limits for each adhesive in Division 1. And you can see the list goes on to be pretty lengthy, down to 39 entries. Moving into the Division 9 example, now they're specifying a specific laminating adhesive with, again, the maximum content for that adhesive. The caution I would have here is if we're going to specify the content or the maximum content back in Division 1 or Division 1 section and in the Division 9 section, we need to be very careful that that stuff is all coordinated.
And that we don't repeat ourselves.
Correct.
The advantage, of course, in doing it all in Division 1 is that we have uniform, because you say it in one place, you have uniform limits, so you don't have one VOC limit for adhesives that's in two product sections. One might be higher than the other one, but if you put it all in Division 1 in one place, you know it's only going to be one value. The downside is, will the contractor even find that information up in Division 1? Will the subcontractor who's actually doing the work know to look there for those limits unless we have a specific cross-reference to them?
Right. So what I take out of the LEED reference guide, at least for the low VOC specifications, is that they're really looking for dispersed information. that they're looking for, in essence, all the procedural requirements, which is common in Division 1, to be placed in Division 1, and all the technical requirements to be in the technical sections. This, as Lewis says, can work fine, except that there's a lot of repetition when you start taking that same VOC adhesive requirement and putting it into what might in effect be 20 or 30 sections. And what happens when you specify a product to be installed by manufacturer's instructions, and the instructions require use of adhesives, but those adhesives are not documented in the technical section. If they're not mentioned in the technical section already, there may be no technical requirement that they be low VOC unless we have a reference back to Division 1 where we've captured that overall project information.
I have a comment from Alan Itkowitz. Even more important, if you show the requirements in both Division 1 and the technical sections, will the subcontractor get the Division 1 requirement?
Good question. And that's always the perennial question when it's dealing with Division 1. And we can't, and there's no way really to ensure that everybody on the project is going to have Division 1. But if we make a direct reference to Division 1, at least they should know enough to ask the question.
I think the key there is just what you said, David, that it needs to be a direct and specific reference, so that the subcontractor is put on notice that that if they're working on carpet or whatever and the adhesives, and we've put that information somewhere else, that we tell them the exact specification number so that he knows, oh, I've got to go look at section such and such and can request that from the GC, or look it up on the electronic maybe project website that has the full set of specs, as opposed to some general note at the beginning of a spec section that says, oh, by the way, there's stuff in Division 1 that applies to the work of this section.
Okay,
it needs to be specific.
We're coming close on the hour, so what I would like to do is just, if everybody would bear with me, I'm just going to back out of this and jump ahead. One of the things, the thing that we were just discussing, I think, is, in essence, this.
Yes.
That if we had a simple reference in each technical section, right in the summary, right up front, and says, go see Division 1 for sustainable design requirements affecting work of this section, that certainly puts the contractor on notice. We could put it in red. Maybe we could make it blinking text, and we have the capability of doing that now. So,
well, as we move into issuing the specifications electronically, we can do a whole lot more that way than we've ever been able to do in the past.
We could turn it into the neon sign, and hopefully that would make the impression.
With the little marquee trace lights running around it.
That's it. That's the ticket. All right.
Or even better, David, how about a hyperlink that would actually take you to that spec section?
Well, and that's not so far-fetched.
No, it's not.
I think with what we're talking about and the technology that we have today, those hyperlinks are going to be more and more used, where someone, the design team, the owner, or someone actually sets up a project workspace where all of this stuff is collected and can be easily linked. Not necessarily located in a BIM model or anything like that, but just easily linked and accessed by anybody. There's no reason to keep it secret.
That's right.
The other option to this dispersed method of specifying, and one that I actually try to promote, is the centralized approach, where I try, and I've had clients agree to this procedure where all LEED requirements are specified in Division 1, because many of the requirements are identical section to section. And then we can go back to this Division 1 reference only, as I just got done showing you. And I think that that simplifies a lot of things as we go through the project and we get near the end and there are some final decisions made that, oh, wait a minute, we just discovered some design condition that says we're not able to get this one credit and we're going to remove it because we know we're not going to get it. If we have to now search that out over multiple sections, you know there's going to be one that's missed. And that can lead to the next RFI and the next change order. So, Louis, which one are you typically using? Which procedure?
Our company's spec masters are built around master spec, which tends to put the requirements, dispersed requirements throughout the product sections, and of course there's a procedural section up front.
So here was one, and I don't think we're going to have time to get to it.
one of the things that people sometimes, the way master spec is set up, you have to edit the thing, and they will put requirements into the submittals article that may or may not apply depending upon what products you have in the section. And so I was reviewing a set of specs last year on a project, and they were including a number of things for regional manufacturing and so forth, and in the context of what was in Part 2, it had no meaning. And I was finding that very common. So that's one thing for our folks to kind of look for is, remember the old specifiers trick of edit Part 2 first, go on to Part 3, and then go back to Part 1 so that you can adapt the submittals requirements for LEED to what is actually specified in Part 2. And you may find that some of those things change.
Right. And just as a parting thought, I want to show you one last thing. This is a list that I typically use for the credits that are actually controlled by the specimens. And you notice the ones that I have sort of highlighted in blue. These are ones that are what I consider to be a single product credit, that if we're going to specify heat island, whether it's for paving or whether it's for roofing, it's usually involving only one, maybe two sections, and that we can go in and easily specify the technical requirements for the SRI right in those sections. The enhanced commissioning is usually ending up being a Division 1 section to describe it, and as is the management, the IAQ management plan. The other items here are generally involving multiple sections and multiple requirements even within each section. And my attitude has been that where we do have all those multiple sections, that the best place to do this is always to say it once and put it in Division 1, and then add that reference back to Division 1 in all the affected sections. So that's my parting thought. Louis, do you have anything? We're right on the 4 o'clock hour.
No, but I sure learned a lot. We might explain to the folks that David is a LEED AP, but I have not yet gone through that endeavor, and so I certainly appreciate the thoughts that David has put together, and that will help me do my work. And I hope that this discussion today was of some use to the rest of you. And we thank every one of you who sent in questions or observations. We really appreciate that. That's exactly what David and I want to have happen with these sessions, and we'll look forward to talking to you next month.
Right. Next meeting is scheduled Thursday, December 2nd, same time, 3 o'clock Eastern, and we hope to see all of you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. You may now disconnect.